Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 11th Annual General Meeting of the Professional Provident Society Holdings Trust, which I will refer to as the Trust. My name is Sybil Sioga. I am the Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Trust, which I will refer to as the Board. And in terms of the trust deed of the Trust, which I will refer to as the trust deed, I will be the chairman of this meeting. This is our second virtual AGM, and I'm pleased to welcome members of PPS and advisors, together with senior staff and non-executive trustees and directors of the PPS group who are attending this meeting. Notice of this AGM was given in the 2020 Integrated Report, which was published on 14 April 2021. Given COVID-19 pandemic, our concern for the health and safety of all our stakeholders, and the statutory regulations which remain in place restricting large gatherings of people, we advised you on the 14th of April 2021 that this meeting would be held virtually and that you would not be able to attend this meeting in person, but that you would be enabled to cast your votes on the resolutions to be proposed at the AGM and to participate in the AGM remotely. Thank you for your cooperation in this regard. There is a small contingent of people at our 6 Annerley Road head office, including some executive directors, representatives from KPMG acting as scrutineers, and senior staff and technical personnel. COVID-19 regulations are being adhered to. The notice convening this meeting has been in your hands for the prescribed period and may be found on page 211 of the 2020 Integrated Report and is available on the webcast of this meeting. The notice will be taken as read. The Secretary informs me that this meeting has been duly called and that the required quorum is present. I therefore declare this meeting duly constituted. Since this meeting is being held electronically and the system may not be familiar to members, I would like to explain the procedures for electronic participation. As indicated in the notice convening the meeting and the accompanying further notice regarding this virtual meeting, members who are participating online will be able to view the live webcast of the meeting and ask questions. Members can also submit their votes online during the meeting. As indicated in the electronic voting guide for this meeting, questions from members participating via the webcast can be submitted by clicking on the question button at the top left of your screen. They will be received and read out by the Trust Secretary and will be responded to at the time allocated for questions. If you experience any technical issues, there is a help button on the left-hand side of the screen. As you are aware, only members or their proxies are entitled to participate in the meeting, and persons who wish to submit questions should state their name, and if they are not members, should indicate on behalf of which members they hold proxies. In order to give you more time to submit your questions in writing, you may already start submitting any questions arising from the proposed resolutions now. You do not need to wait for the resolutions to be proposed. Also, in order to give you more time to submit your votes, the voting platform is open and will remain open until all of the proposed resolutions have been dealt with. Those of you who are eligible to vote at this meeting may do so now if you wish to, or at any stage during the meeting until the close of the voting by clicking on the action button, click to vote, on your screen, which will enable you to view the resolutions and vote. Once you have made your voting selections on the various resolutions, press the green Submit button at the foot of the screen on the Vote on All Resolutions page. The platform will confirm that your votes have been accepted. Thereafter, by clicking on the dashboard link at top left on the screen, you will be able to return to the screen to continue viewing the webcast. Where members have submitted proxy forms instructing their proxies to vote in a specific manner on one or more of the resolutions being put to the meeting, such instructed votes are already recorded on the voting platform. If you have been appointed as a proxy for other members to cast discretionary votes on their behalf, you are required to cast those votes in a similar way to casting your own votes by clicking on the discretionary voting button, which is situated in the navigation bar on the left-hand side of the screen. Once you have loaded your votes on the electronic voting system, you will no longer be able to access the voting system. After the last resolution has been proposed, the voting platform will remain open for a short time to allow you to complete your votes, and then the votes will be counted by the scrutineers. The voting results for all resolutions will be announced at the end of the meeting after the scrutineers have verified the recorded votes. While the votes are being counted, Mr. Anton Musgrave will make a presentation on the subject of the manner in which exponential technologies are reshaping professional services. I will now deal with the required formalities for this annual general meeting. I request that, in terms of the trust deed, a poll be taken in respect of each resolution to be voted upon at this meeting. And I have appointed Ms. Alison Andrews and Ms. Rita Greyling of KPMG to act as scrutineers for the purposes of the polls. And I will propose all resolutions, and Mr. Charles Erasmus has agreed to second all resolutions proposed by me. Mr. Erasmus, will you please confirm that?
Chairman, I confirm that I'm seconding all the resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Erasmus. I will therefore not repeat the proposing and seconding procedure in respect of every resolution. Now that we have explained the procedure and have dealt with the formalities, we shall proceed with the business of the meeting. As part of our communication with our members, Mr. Isaac Smith, the Group Chief Executive Officer of PPS Insurance, will make a presentation on the 2020 Integrated Report and the performance of the Trust. After Mr. Smith's presentation, there will be an opportunity to ask questions on the results and all the resolutions being put to the meeting. And I will ask the relevant PPS representatives to respond to any questions. Members are requested not to submit to this meeting any questions of a personal nature, as they cannot be dealt with here on a confidential basis. And such questions should please be directed to PPS member services. Again, I invite members to submit questions as they arise during the presentation of the results, and they will be dealt with immediately after the presentation. I will now hand over to Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Dear members, ladies and gentlemen, in the next 20 minutes or so, we'll look at some numbers. And I am fully aware that many who are tuned in tonight have seen much of it already in the personalized videos or perhaps browsing through our annual report on our website or the video clips that we played before this meeting started. But I shall add some perspectives and summarize with some overall reflections. And we must remember that PPS will celebrate its 80th anniversary this year, and what a resilient organisation it has become, being there when our members need us most. I joined PPS when we celebrated our 75th anniversary in 2016, and time indeed flies when you have purpose. These are pictures of some of PPS's general managers of the past, and what a wonderful business they have built for the benefit of our professional members. All credit to them. Many older colleagues often tell us many war stories of the past. And that reminds us that we were indeed founded in a war in 1941, the early days of the Second World War. And you'll expect that it is in the DNA of such an organization to survive and even thrive in difficult times. The COVID pandemic was not the first major challenge that PPS has experienced, and it will certainly not be the last. But we could not have asked for a more challenging backdrop than 2020 to prove that our mutual model provides us with a solid base to stay true to our purpose. Our purpose at PPS is to enhance the financial security of our professional members, or as we often frame it, to help them protect their dreams through a range of financial solutions. Due to our mutual model, all profits are returned to members with qualifying products. But, and this is important, our first objective is not to make profits. Our first objective is to assist our members when bad things happen to them, to pay valid claims, especially in a year such as 2020. Only after we have done that, if there is money left, then that is returned to our members. So it is first to protect, and then after that to contribute to wealth creation. In my message in our integrated report on 2020, which is available on our website, I say that a crisis has the ability to either expose the flaws in a model or in a team, or to prove its robustness. At PPS, we can look back at 2020 with a lot of pride. We are proud to be associated with professionals who were often at the forefront of helping the bigger community deal with the challenges of 2020 and with the advisors who serve them. And I'm proud about the team at PPS who, whilst operating remotely for most of the year, were able to serve our members. Do take the time to page through the report. Our marketing team has, as always, put in much effort on this. All right, so let's dive into some of the numbers. We usually start with this slide, the group's assets. It reached 41.2 billion in 2020, 8% up on the previous year, and a compound growth of 10% over the last 10 years. It shows we have a strong balance sheet. We can withstand a year such as 2020. Remember, a business like ours that provides mortality and sickness cover was in the eye of the storm of the COVID pandemic. And yet solvency is not an issue. We can honour valid claims. And secondly, it's a business that shows robust growth thanks to the continuous support and trust of our members. So what adds up to the 41.2 billion? The slide shows the breakdown. Now, being an insurance business, we have to hold reserves for future possible claims and a bit more to prove that we are solvent. That is the 13% portion there in the dark gold colour. Most of this will in future also be returned to our members, either in the forms of claim or as profit. And those profits will then be added to the dark blue slice. The 7% portion is investments of our members in insurance tax wrappers, such as living annuities and endowment policies. The 4% slice there in the light blue colour is investments in subsidiaries of the group, such as PPS short-term insurance. But the big portion there, about 3/4, in the dark blue colour, is the money in the profit share accounts of our members. A few words on this. When we invest this money for our members, the objective is to outperform inflation over the longer term by a good margin. To do that, we need to have exposure to growth assets such as equities. This slide shows how these assets are invested. Almost 70% is in local and international equities. Last year, we saw huge market volatility, and yet the returns came through, which we shall discuss later. This was due to the diversified and long-term approach in our investment strategy, which allowed us not to knee-jerk during market volatility. This slide shows new life insurance business over the past few years in South Africa and Namibia. There was good growth in 2019 in a stagnant market. We had big plans in place for more growth in 2020, but unfortunately the COVID environment was not benign for new business. Especially the second quarter was extremely tough. We still ended only 11% down on the 2019 record year. The last quarter, when things started to normalize again, was a stronger quarter for new business. And we see this momentum continuing in 2021. This new business contributed to gross premium income or revenue, and that was up 7% on the previous year, about double the official inflation rate, to 5.3 billion. The compound growth over the last 10 years was about 11%. This slide shows the lapses on the life side over the past 7 years. The line at the top shows lapses in our agency channel, and the one at the bottom is for brokers, and the middle one is the aggregate. The agency channel work with younger members on average, where lapses are typically a bit higher, as many things can still change in a younger person's life. But we are happy to see lapses coming down for that channel, which means better quality business. For the overall rate, while it increased slightly from 4.1% to 5.4% over the first 6 years, as is to be expected in the harsh economic environment over those years. But then it came down last year, and I must admit, this surprised us. It shows that the arrangements that we have put in place to support our members to not lapse policies helped, but it also shows that life and income protection was appreciated in the pandemic year. We have the lowest lapse rates in the life industry in South Africa and some of the lowest in the world. And the actuaries will tell you that low lapses are very good for the profitability of a life business, and those profits go back to our members. So it's kind of a virtuous circle. Okay, that brings us to the real story of 2020, the benefits and claims that we have paid. The year gave us the opportunity to really step in and support our members. In total, in 2020, the amount that we've paid in benefits to members was 4.8 billion, almost 30% up from 2019. And if we unpack it, we see that sickness payments were almost R1 billion there at the top. Most of our members have sickness cover. It's a big part of what PPS is about. And in a pandemic year, you would expect it to grow. And it was up 53% on 2019. The second line there, permanent incapacity, that's the income that those unfortunate members who cannot work anymore due to sickness or an accident, or who can only work to a limited extent, receive until retirement. Without this income, most of them would have been financially ruined. The third row, death claims, came to a massive over 1.1 billion, up 81%. Total life claims, that's the first 5 rows there in the table, came to 3.1 billion, up 45% on 2019. What is interesting is that short-term insurance claims in the second last row reduced by 9%, and this benefited last year because people were at home, theft was less, there were less vehicles on the road. And then the last row is all the other benefits, mostly profit share to members who have retired or to those who have passed away, and other early withdrawal benefits, and we shall look at some examples later. These are big numbers, so let's make it a little bit more tangible. We've processed around 27,000 life claims in 2020, about 110 every working day, or a claim every 5 minutes. Around 13 million in risk benefits were paid every working day in 2020. The number of claims increased by 25% year on year. Let's now look at COVID claims in 2020 in a bit more detail. Now, our total life claims, as I've just said, it increased by 45% or 960 million. Now, on the left of that slide, we show the 2020 claims that we know for sure were COVID related. In other words, it was officially classified as such, 4,200 of them. The total number is 390 million, which can be split into 234 million of death claims and 156 million of sickness claims. What about the rest of the increase? Well, it can be divided in 3 broad categories. Some of it were also COVID claims, but it was not classified as such, maybe due to stigma or whatever. And then there are many claims that are indirectly COVID related. Examples are, sadly, suicides or suboptimal treatments or lack of screening, etc. And then the third category is all the rest, normal annual increases in cover and statistical variance. Our insurers advise us that they see this picture across the industry. Big year-on-year increases in life claims, of which only a portion is classified as COVID. If we drill further into the COVID claims, the slide shows the geographic spread. Gauteng and the Western Cape are the highest, mostly due to the spread of the book of business. 2% of claims were paid to members that resided outside of South Africa. And as we all know, one of the value propositions at PPS is that you are covered wherever you may find yourself on the globe without extra loadings, because professionals often have to work or travel overseas. Interesting there on the right is that 20% of claims were for members who were not necessarily sick. That's members that had to quarantine or were classified as persons under investigation. Some of them were not even COVID positive. This is where the protocols that we had developed last year kicked in. And this makes it somewhat difficult to compare our statistics with competitors. Competitors with shareholder stakeholders had to be tighter around their definitions. We, on the other hand, with no shareholder interest to protect, could look for reasons to help, provided, of course, it's fair across the membership. One can argue that 20% is typically claims that competitors would not have paid. And that's the strength of our mutual model. The slide shows the number of COVID claims across different age groups. It is not what you would expect. Big portions at younger ages. Coronavirus, as we all know, affect older people more. And it is again a reflection of our claims protocols for sickness, where younger people who had to isolate also often had a valid claim. This chart shows the claims across different professions. Most were among the medical professions, and this is, of course, related to their frontline roles in the pandemic. The upside is that those in the medical professions are, rightly so, in the forefront, at the front of the queue to get vaccinated, and that will affect our claims experience in 2021. The slide shows the spread of our members across professions, and you can see that the medical members make up around 27%, but on the previous slide they accounted for about 3/4 of the claims. The good news is that despite these claims, we still generated an operating profit in 2020. Of course, due to the claims experience, it was smaller, but there was still a profit. So let us remind ourselves quickly how our mutual model works. We've got premiums coming in there on the left. That's the 5.3 billion that we saw earlier. From that, we pay member benefits, the 4.8 billion that we already unpacked. And then there's, of course, the cost of running the business. That's the only money that is not eventually returned to members, and our board keep a very close eye on our expenses. And we must then make sure that we hold enough money to cover future claims. What is left then is the operating profit. And this came to 0.55 billion, 550 million in 2020, down from 1.1 billion in 2019. But that is, of course, not all. There are also the investment returns on all past profit, that dark blue slice we discussed earlier. And this number was 1.67 billion in 2020, down from 3.1 in 2019. So in total, we distributed 2.22 billion to our members, 0.55 on the operating side, and 1.67 billion from the investment side. This picture just shows the build-up, the total profit that was returned to members for the last decade, 27.7 billion in total. If you look at the detail over the last years, about 10 years, yes, we see the gold bars, the operating profit, quite stable, which is not unusual for a life business, except for a pandemic year such as 2020. And then the dark blue bars, the investment income, can vary quite a bit, and it depends on the investment markets, as we have noted earlier. The light blue bars are the totals, and so total profit reduced from 4.2 billion in 2019, which was the highest ever in PPS's 80-year history, to 2.2 billion in 2020. But it still shows the strength of our mutual model, the ability to generate profit at this level in a pandemic year. Just a bit more detail on profit share. It's always fun to look at the number of members who have accumulated more than 1 million in their profit share accounts, and we see this number up by 11% on 2019 to 7,000, just more than 7,500. Of these, just over 5,300 are still active policyholders. 582 members have more than 2 million accumulated in their profit share accounts, up more than 20% on last year. 260 of these profit millionaires are younger than 50, and 27 are younger than 45, and the youngest is 41. These are the clever members who have joined PPS many years ago. Here are some actual and interesting examples of members who have retired last year. The first one is a member who have retired last year at the young age of 85. Total premiums over the course of the 52 years of membership were less than R250,000, and the profit share payout was more than 10 times that, and that is just absolutely amazing. Second last example there, also an interesting one. That's a member who have not retired but who passed away with a death claim. And yet more than 1.7 million of profit was also paid into the estate. And this profit payment was not influenced by the claim. At PPS, we do not believe in things like no claim bonuses like some other insurers. If you are unfortunate to have a life event where you need to make a claim, you claim. The profit share stands independent of that, which brings me to the next slide. Some other aspects to highlight about profit share. It is automatically activated when you have a qualifying product, and there is no extra premium or membership fee. It's housed in a life policy, which means it is protected and it's also tax efficient. And when it vests, it can remain in the policy to fund retirement expenditure. And as I've just mentioned, there is no penalty when you have a claim. Chair, a very interesting innovation that we added this year to how profits are distributed is the concept of the profit share booster. Now, this remunerates members if they make use of more solutions that PPS offers, wider than only life insurance. For example, if you have a qualifying life product and if you have, let's say, a short-term insurance product as well, also at PPS, your profit share will be increased or boosted by 15%. Or if you have a qualifying life product and also a PPS short-term insurance policy, investments at PPS, and if you are also a profit member, your profit will be boosted by a full 27.5%. Now, talking about these other businesses, let's very quickly look at some numbers as far as the subsidiaries are concerned. Just want to say overall, 2020 was a very good year for all our subsidiaries. All of them were more profitable than what we originally budgeted, and for different reasons. And this is good news, as it means there were extra profit allocations for our members. First, PPS investments. The slide shows how the number of investors has grown over the years, passing 50,000 last year. And although the growth is impressive, 52,000 is still small compared to the almost 130,000 members in our life business, so there is much runway for growth. The growth in membership and the strong investment markets towards the end of the year helped total assets to grow by 14% from 37.8 billion to 43.1 billion at the end of last year. And the growth in assets of PPSI was also due to record new business inflows of just below 7.5 billion, which was 22% better than the previous year's record number. We are also very pleased that investment performance in almost all our funds at PPS relative to benchmarks and to peers were exceptional in 2020, and I'm happy to say that this outperformance continued in 2021. If we move to our short-term insurance business, this is an interesting story. We made a profit for the first time of 3.8 billion in 2020, and that was after also returning more than 2 million in premiums to policyholders in April last year because they were less on the road. The loss in 2019 was 27 million. The pandemic, of course, had a significant impact on the results. This resulted in a net loss ratio of 51% for the full year against the budgeted expectation of 67%. The loss ratio in 2019 was 69%. Members with short-term cover at PPS who also have qualifying life policies for the first time enjoyed profit share distributions. And under our short-term license from January 2019, we also provide cover for medical indemnity for our healthcare professional members. And the loss last year was significantly less than budgeted, and the number of insured professionals increased to over 1,000 now. Our healthcare administration business had another excellent year in 2020. Revenue of almost 300 million was 9% up in 2019. Profit was 12% up. And this is mainly as a result of the growth in membership in the schemes that we administer and reduced resignations, as members were obviously very reluctant to lapse medical aid cover in a pandemic year. And as always, PPS members with qualifying products, while also ProfMed members benefit from the portion of the profit of these administration services that are returned to them. Namibia delivered a strong performance last year, allocating 159 million of profits to members after paying benefits and valid claims of 135 million. And they achieved new business of 17 million, which was 17 million Namibian dollars, up 7% on 2019. PPS made significant strides to expand its business in Namibia by introducing new core products in 2020. Then just a word or two on our membership. If we look at how our members are spread across the value propositions in the group, there's still not a big overlap. In fact, only 558 are clients of each of the 4 major businesses in the group. That's Life, Investments, Short-Term and Profnet, up 10% on the previous year. And we believe the profit share booster will assist here, as so many members are losing out on quality solutions which are bespoke for professionals. If you look at the demographics, how our members are spread across the different ethnic groups, about 2/3 are white, but the other groups, and especially the Africans, are increasing, and this is, of course, due to the profile of new members joining, which is what this slide shows, and 2020 was the first year in which African new members were more than white new members. So, Chair, just to summarize, if you reflect on 2020, the investment markets eventually ended the year strong. Expenses were well managed and the subsidiary numbers exceeded the business plans. I've mentioned the good lapse experience, the strong new business inflows in PPS investments, and the good peer relative investment performance. More members are also making use of our fiduciary proposition, which assists them in the drafting of wills. From a profit perspective, what did not go so well was the big increase in life claims. But for our members who had to claim, I could have put this on the previous slide as something that did go well, as we could support them during the pandemic. New business for both the insurance businesses was a challenge, and because of the strained economic situation, lapses on the short-term side increased. Chair, I think I shall leave it at that. A lot more detail, as I've said, is available in the integrated report that is available on our website, including, of course, a CEO message from me and a chairman's message from you. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there any questions on Mr. Smith's presentation or on any of the resolutions being put to the meeting? Have any questions been submitted, Mr. Barnard?
Yes, Chairman. We do have a question. I won't read out the person's name who asked this question, but they wanted to know how to go about voting. If the members are able to ask the questions online, it means they are already logged in on the system. So all they have to do is go to the voting button on the left-hand top side of their screen. And if they have any votes to cast, it will reflect there when they press the voting button. Bear in mind, if you've already cast your vote by way of proxy, you won't have any votes to be cast at the meeting now. Then, Chair, I have the first real question. It's from a Mr. T.G. Steeneveld. His question is regarding the 1.7 billion investment returns, and he would like to know what percentage return this represents on the capital invested, and in which asset classes the profit share account is invested.
Thanks, Vincent. I'll ask Mr. Smith to respond to that question, please.
Thank you, Chair. Tiffany, you must help me here. Tiffany Bush is our Chief Financial Officer. It's high single digits was the returns.
Yes, Chair. I can answer that. We measure our investment return on a 5-year rolling basis, and the amount for 2020 was 6.9%, which was ahead of our benchmark of 6.3%, so a good outcome. The second part of the question was around the asset classes. Isaac did have a slide on that in his presentation, and it's really a balanced portfolio, so there's a mix between equities, bonds, international. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, maybe I can just add to that. So Tiffany's quite right. That one slide, this question was probably posed just before I put up the slide. But quite a significant portion in growth assets. And that is just because our investment time horizon with our profit share is quite long. And we have the privilege to have that because our average member stay invested for a generation. And if that is the case, you can have a long time horizon, and you can expose more assets to growth assets. And yeah, as Tiffany has just said, that generate over a rolling 5-year period, it generates very good returns.
Thank you, Tiffany and Isaac. Are there any further questions, Mr. Barnard?
Chairman, we've had no further questions posed, so we can proceed.
Thank you. We now move on to the proposed resolutions. And once again, I remind you that you may submit your votes on all resolutions until 5 minutes after the final resolution has been put to members. The annual financial statements of the Trust for the year ended 31 December 2020, along with the reports of the trustees, the audit committees, the Social and Ethics Committee, and the external auditors included in the integrated report, were made available electronically to all members. And I now propose the resolution adopting those annual financial statements and reports. Please complete your vote online in respect of this resolution. I now propose the resolution to reappoint PricewaterhouseCoopers Incorporated as the auditors of the Trust. Please complete your vote online in respect of this resolution. I will now deal with the election of the trustees. There are currently 10 elected trustees in office, being the maximum number of elected trustees, of whom 3 are required to retire by rotation at this annual general meeting. There are therefore 3 vacancies to be filled by the election of trustees at this meeting. The trustees who are retiring by rotation at this meeting are Dr. N.H.P. Khosa, Dr. C.M. Kruger, and Mr. E.A. Muller. I would like to pay tribute to Mr. E.B. Muller, my mentor and the former chairman of the PPS Holdings Trust Board, from whom I took over that role on 13 June 2018. Mr. Muller retires from the board and the PPS group at this meeting, having served on this board and that of its predecessor, PPS Limited, since 2002. On behalf of the PPS group, I would like to express our deep gratitude and appreciation to Mr. Muller for his significant contribution to the group over a period of almost 20 years, his wise counsel and sound leadership. We will miss him. We wish him well in his retirement, together with his wife Zarina, who has been a pillar of strength for him. Dr. N.H.P. Khosa and Dr. C.M. Kruger have offered themselves for re-election, and their eligibility for re-election has been confirmed by the Group Nominations Committee. In addition to those 2 candidates standing for re-election, the Group Nominations Committee has confirmed the eligibility of a further 3 candidates who have been nominated for election to the board of the Trust. The nominations of all candidates who are standing for election at this meeting have been approved by the board on the recommendation of the Nominations Committee. Consequently, there are 5 candidates for the 3 vacant positions on the board, and abbreviated biographical details for all of these candidates are set out in the 2020 integrated report. Since more members have been nominated for appointment as trustees than there are vacancies, the trust deed requires that there shall be a vote on a resolution to elect each nominee. The nominees whose election resolutions were adopted at the general meeting shall be ranked from highest to lowest by the number of votes cast in favor of the resolutions to elect them. Such number of the highest ranked nominees as does not exist the number of vacancies shall be elected as trustees, and the resolutions to elect the other nominees shall, notwithstanding the votes cast in favor of those resolutions, be deemed to have been rejected. I now propose the resolutions for the election of each of the following persons as trustees. The trustees who retire by rotation and who offer themselves for re-election are Dr. N.H.P. Kosa, Dr. C.M. Kruger. The additional nominees are Mr. A.H. de Vries, Ms. V. Krill, Advocate J. Malherbe. Please complete your vote online in respect of these resolutions. The members of the Trust are required to elect an audit committee comprising at least 3 trustees who meet the requirements of Clause 26.1 of the Trust Deed. The current members of Trust Audit Committee are Ms. D.L.T. Dondo, Mr. P. Renshaw, and Professor H.E. Weiner. Ms. Dondo, Mr. Renshaw, and Professor Weiner have offered themselves for election as members of the Trust Audit Committee and have been recommended by the Board for appointment to the Trust Audit Committee. So I now propose the resolution to elect them. Please complete your vote online in respect of this resolution. I now propose a resolution approving the remuneration of the trustees of the Trust for the period 1 July 2021. Until such time as this remuneration is amended by a further resolution as set out in paragraph 5 of the notice of this meeting. In order for this resolution to become effective, it requires the support of at least 75% of the votes cast thereon at this meeting. Please complete your vote online in respect of this resolution. All proposed resolutions have now been put to members. The voting platform will remain open for a further 5 minutes from now for you to complete your votes. Thereafter, voting is closed and the scrutineers will record the votes and provide the results. I will now hand over to Mr. Smith to introduce the presentation by Mr. Anton Musgrave while we wait for the scrutineers to finalize the results. Mr. Smith.
Chair, thank you. It is my privilege to introduce Mr. Anton Musgrave, who probably does not need much of an introduction to many professionals because his business Future World has worked with so many businesses and professionals over the years to position them for the future. Anton is a lawyer by profession, by training, but he's also a businessman and an angel investor in many startups. He lectures at global conferences and leading business schools across the world and revels in challenging leaders to think about the future and building future-relevant and game-changing new business models. He loves underwater photography, and I think he probably prefers doing it in warmer waters than those of Cape Town, where he lives. He joins mountain biking, but I also think he prefers e-bikes these days, and sailing. And I personally had the privilege of joining him on his boat in Cape Town a couple of years ago. When Anton and our marketing team discussed his participation tonight, he asked if he can push the boundaries a bit. And we said, look, Anton, AGMs can be a bit boring. And our vision for the future is to attract more members to our AGM and give some entertainment value, but also value-adding takeaways. So, Anton, you are welcome. We are sure they would appreciate to be challenged, so go for it. His talk is very interestingly titled Control-Alt-Delete. So with that, Anton, over to you.
Isak, thank you so much. And Madam Chair, members, welcome to our conversation this evening about what the future might hold. When thinking about, what is the caption that I can use to capture what era we're entering into as leaders in the world, I thought of those old days where if you're older, or as old as I am at least, you'll remember the Control-Alt-Delete button held down together on your keyboard set off a total system reboot. And I think it's very appropriate for the world we're living in now to think of the era that will follow in the next 10 years as really triggering a global system reboot, a system in business, in professional services, in humanity, perhaps certainly in technology. And I want to explore some of the big themes. We only have a short time this evening together, but explore some of the really big themes that we're talking about. But just to kick it off and give you some context about why this reboot is beginning to happen with increasing speed. In the newspapers that I browsed through early this morning, just today, in one day, in a few newspapers, these were some of the headings. The smartphone is now the place where we all live, and we pay as much attention to that as we do to our own homes. And this is straddling, of course, every single demographic. It's no longer just the domain of our young children, but it's absolutely everyone across the age spectrum. The second headline that caught my attention, and maybe it was because I was dealing earlier today with one of the world's biggest bottling companies, but the story that the next 10 years will be the hottest probably on record, and for a bottling company that sells refreshing drinks, that was really good news. But we can no longer ignore the fact that these changes in the climate, in our environment, are actually happening. And then the second one, and allied to that, was really this notion we all know about Greta Thunberg with her high-pitched voice, who started protesting the authorities on climate change as a lonely single schoolgirl only 2 or 3 years ago, and now has a global movement. But what's even more interesting is that children are now taking governments to court because of government's inaction around climate change. And guess what? The kids are starting to win. So absolutely fascinating how just 3 little snippets of news really get one to think about what the next 10, 15, or 20 years may hold. For me, I think it's not overly stating the matter that as a species on this planet Earth, I don't think we can claim to have covered ourselves in glory over the past centuries. And I think we face some fundamental decisions in these 4 areas over the next 10 years. And the decisions we take as business leaders, as community leaders, as political leaders in these 4 domains will determine really the legacy that we leave to our children and our grandchildren. We talk about the 4th industrial revolution, and we all talk about artificial intelligence and robots. I think the 5th industrial revolution, if it's not about rehumanizing humans in every dimension, then I think we have a limited lifespan as a species ahead. And that maybe will be long beyond my lifetime and your lifetime, but certainly unless we refocus on those features, those virtues that make humans very specifically different to the smartest robot or AI, I think we're in real trouble. And I came across this definition, and perhaps it was over the Easter weekend, but I really loved the story. And it said, if you as a human or a business or a profession even are cracked by external forces that are impacting your business or your profession, it's the end of life. But where that business or profession is cracked from within, from your own internal thinking and your own internal aspirations and ambitions, then it's the start of life. And so the really profound message for each of us is we cannot cling onto the protections we place around us and think that we will be immune to the challenges facing everyone on planet Earth. We really need to reimagine exponentially who it is that we want to be as a business, as a human, as an organization. But we need to reimagine that future, folks, as 2 worlds are colliding. The old world that we know and are comfortable with. And as Isak said, I was a lawyer, practiced law for 20 years. I ran an investment firm for many, many years. All of these worlds, our success that brought us to where we are today, the rules are fundamentally changing. Our old world that we know and are comfortable with is colliding with a new world. And when worlds collide, there's friction, there's heat, and there's resistance. And the scale of that resistance to a seamless transition into the next era of the new world is directly correlated to the scale of legacy that we bring into this transitionary period. So think from a business point of view as standard operating procedures of the old world really need to evolve differently in this new world. And when we hold on to those old things, the heat and the resistance and the friction is increased. So when we look at this future, and it's sort of interesting post the election last year, it was kind of a crazy time, and it's got a little bit less crazy, perhaps because, Mr. Trump is no longer on social media. But think about the shifts in the world of geopolitics, the inexorable shift from the domination of West in liberal democracies across to the East, the economic shift gradually from the West across to the East. The whole world of geopolitics is changing. And what's really interesting about geopolitics is if you look at the reason for most of the wars in history were fought over access to oil. And yet, in the new world, how do you get energy? You don't fight a war to own a geography that is oil rich. You simply build new solar panels or put windmills up, as I saw along the coast of the Western Cape this weekend when I was traveling up past Paternoster. Huge windmill farms generating energy. Just put them up and the energy is free virtually after that. We have to ask ourselves whether the institutions created post-Second World War are still fit for purpose. And I haven't yet found too many people that tell me, Anton, the United Nations, the World Bank, the UN for that matter, are really delivering brilliantly on their 2021 and beyond mandate. It seems that the institutions we created to create peace and stability and economic fortune in the world are under huge pressure, themselves not making the successful transition into this new world. And then we have to ask ourselves whether democracy and capitalism are still fit for purpose. Now, of course, we have to reward entrepreneurship, the risk takers, the innovators, the providers of capital, the creators of wealth, etc. But is the disparity that we're seeing as a consequence of successful capitalism really equitable? Tonight, 3 billion people go to bed hungry on the planet. We need to give 8 billion people, and in 2030, 9 billion people on the planet, a fair hope that tomorrow will be better than today. So even the institutions that we hold dear and true are coming under immense growing pressure. The good news is, of course, there's a new movement, if you like. There's a new debate, a new conversation around not only the green economy, but the green circular economy, which promises, infinitely better futures for our children and grandchildren than what we've done to the planet. The good news also is that if you look at history and what has economic growth done post-pandemics, time and time again, the 5, 7, 8 years post a pandemic in history has always led to a period of sustained, strong economic growth. The World Economic Forum is predicting 6 to 7.5% global growth, 6.5% growth in the US in the next 12 months to 2 years. Fantastic opportunity if we're thinking about things through the right lens and not just through the lens of yesterday. Because the challenge is for all of us, and we've seen it manifestly illustrated in the vaccine response of the rich nations. We're seeing vaccine apartheid happening in the world right now, where the rich nations are holding on to the stocks and supplies of this. At least the West seems now to be willing to entertain a debate around releasing the intellectual property or patents around the vaccines. But again, humans have not covered themselves in glory with moral fortitude in solving this massive, massive global crisis. And so we've begun to realize that things that we took absolutely for granted in the last number of years suddenly have become incredibly fragile. The system we're living in seems, when you listen to the news broadcasts in the evenings, you get a sense almost of panic that the system called Earth and 7.5, 8 billion people seem to be in a phase of absolute fragility. And of course, it was triggered by the arrival of a pandemic. And for those of us that have been looking at the future for a long time, this was not a surprise. I mean, I think the scale of it and the speed of it has been a surprise. But we've been talking for a long time about the post-antibiotic world where humans take all these tablets and we diminish our immune system and our ability to respond to a pandemic. So no real surprise. And of course, the reason for change is not COVID-19. It's just another data point on the radar screen that leaders need to take into account. But I guess suddenly, with immense speed, we all realize that something fundamental has changed in the world. The good news is, if you look at how organizations responded to helping their employees, tens of thousands, millions of them around the world, work from home in just a few weeks, it gives me confidence that we are able to do really ambitious projects in a very short space of time if we set our mind to it and we align everyone's ambitions around the desired outcome. So really, what is it that is creating the turmoil in the world of business and I guess in the professions and in the investment markets. And it's what I call the unstoppable business tsunamis. Now, we all know what a tsunami looks like when it hits the shore. It smashes everything in front of it. But a tsunami starts way off our personal radar screen of awareness in another ocean, when there's a deep event in the bowels of the earth that we almost don't know about. And suddenly there's a ripple on top the surface of the ocean. And that ripple doesn't dissipate. It grows in momentum and speed and impact until it reaches our shore. And what we're seeing in the world of business is these unstoppable tsunamis are not acting independently. They're colliding and collaborating with one another to change the landscape in which business takes place. And us on this call, as leaders in our communities and in our businesses and in our professions, need to be the lighthouse that gives those around us in our ecosystem guidance and safety and future positive direction. Critically important in a world where so much is changing. And these folks are just some of the forces that are reshaping the world. And the interesting thing is not the individual forces or our personal knowledge about nanotech or autonomous vehicles or edge computing, but it's the combination between these different forces that is creating absolutely exponential opportunities for those of us open to them. And here's the trick. For those of us that know at least enough of each of these tsunamis to be able to make an intelligent business strategic decision about how to exploit them, how to leverage them, how to harness them in our businesses and in our lives. And everything is up for grabs. I mean, we've all been listening to, Elon Musk last night on Saturday Night Live and his ramblings about Doge, one of the cryptocurrencies, and Bitcoin and Ethereum and all the rest of it. But what's really interesting to me is not the individual cryptocurrencies at the moment. It's the fact that how we're able to transfer value between contracting parties is fundamentally changing. Very few people today suddenly in the last year use cash anymore. Why? Because of COVID, of course. But the truth is cash is expensive and it gives rise to corruption, etc., etc. Imagine a world where, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other cryptocurrency, imagine a world where there's zero corruption anywhere in the world because the vehicle we use to transfer value can be tracked transparently on new modern ledger systems driven by tools like the blockchain, for example. Of course, governments are beginning to wake up to this opportunity and asking themselves the question, what does that mean for us? And so in the rest of the time that I have with you, I want to explore these four critical areas that are reshaping the world of business and life as we know it, and try and leave you with some practical personal lessons from each of these four areas. So let's start off with what it takes to be relevant in the future. And folks, here's the message. It's wrong to ask the question, what is the future of my legal business or my healthcare business or my panel beating business or whatever it is? It's simply the wrong question. We need to recognize that something is happening at the moment that triggers that Control-Alt-Delete moment to change the world that we know. And so to understand what these implications are, we need to start further away from our own business. And we need to ask ourselves, how will the world operate 10 years from now? I choose 10 simply because it's a zone where most of us will acknowledge that we have doubt about the answer. The moment you ask the question in a timeline too close to now, all of us are confident that we'll have all the answers, or at least some of them. And then we limit ourselves in our thinking. So let's go into the zone of doubt. It's the moment of perfect freedom, obviously. And let's ask ourselves the question, what happens when my children, who are 10 years old now, get to age 20? How will they behave? What will they want? What will they value? What will the marketplace of 2030 look like? Which industries will be winning and which will be under pressure? What will be scarce in 2030? And what will be abundant? Important questions to gauge and get some answers about how we will be living as humans in the future and what that means for business. So let's talk about airlines. Let's talk about airlines, folks, in February 2020. And imagine I was running a strategy session for an airline business in February last year. And I said to the executives in the room, tell me what business you're in. I suspect they would have said to me, Anton, we're in an airline business. I mean, our name is Emirates Airlines. and we take passengers in aircraft from A to B. And of course, they wouldn't have been wrong. But then that's why they missed this reality only 1 month later. The world came crashing to an end. And yet at the same time, in March 2020, Zoom was valued at $48 billion. And not one airline put in a bid to buy Zoom because they're in the airline business, moving people from A to B in aircraft. What business is Zoom in? The business of connecting people. And if an airline had thought widely and laterally and intuitively about what their business is, simply sending Anton to a PPS boardroom AGM to be there live, what am I actually doing? I'm connecting with you as members from a stage and you're sitting in the audience. We're still connecting. Of course, the airlines never got that right, and 1 year later, Zoom is now worth $90 billion. It was $130 billion a few months ago. But still, had the airlines bought Zoom a year ago, they would have doubled their investment. Not too shady. And that's, of course, why a company like Tesla, which last night was valued at $647 billion and sells a fraction of the cars that Toyota does. Understand, folks, Toyota is one of the world's best, most highly regarded, efficient, productive car manufacturers. But that's just it. That's all they are. You see, Tesla sees themselves as being in the mobility business, the renewable energy business, the artificial intelligence business, the computing business, etc. And so Tesla has very successfully created a story around its future ambitions, not its past sales or production efficiency, but its future aspirations, its future possibilities and potential. And so smart investors around the world are saying, we don't know exactly how you're going to make much more money, but we believe you have much more chance of making much more money than someone running a company like Daimler, Chrysler, Volkswagen, or Toyota. And so in this new world, the capital markets are penalizing companies that are asset heavy and idea light, and they're rewarding companies that are idea heavy with intellectual capital, property, innovation, ideas, brands, and very importantly, a story about what they're going to do in the future. And so as we think about ourselves and our professional practices and our businesses, we need to observe not only the obvious changes around us, but we need to ask ourselves, what are the second and third order implications? What are the implications of everyone working from home, kids being online all the time? Not the obvious answers, but what happens 2 or 3 step changes later? And what does that tell us about the future of our business and the exponential potential? But here's the good news. Again, news from Elon Musk, and Isak, you'll enjoy me maybe using Elon. He's one of my fans, I must say, or I'm one of his fans. But he came from Pretoria. He went to the same school I did, Pretoria Boys High. But the point is, we don't need the technical expertise to rethink, reimagine ourselves or our businesses. We just need to challenge, question, and be curious in an unrelenting fashion. And Elon Musk does that so brilliantly. Another person that does that really well for me is Jeff Bezos of Amazon. And of course, we all know the scale of business he's created. But he does it with 3 very important insights. Number 1, he has not just customer centricity. He doesn't talk about customer delight. He talks about customer obsession. Absolutely relentlessly obsessed about his customers. Coupling that not with incremental evolutionary innovation, where we tinker around the edges to squeeze out a little bit of increased performance or a little bit of cost reduction, etc. He talks about and really embraces the notion of changing things radically and regularly to change the level of the game. And then, of course, what he's maybe most famous for is taking a long-term view. He said to friends and family when he borrowed money from them 20 years ago, I will not make a profit for many years. I will not give you interim updates. And if you don't like it, don't buy my share. But I'm going to build the world's best business. And so lessons for each of us is to be absolutely intensely vested in what our clients are experiencing. How do we dramatically change the way we do things and not lose sight of the destination over the horizon? If only the capital markets, Wall Street, the stock exchanges, and if only governments and politicians followed Jeff Bezos' advice, I think the world would be in a fundamentally better place. So let's spend a few moments talking about the digitization of the entire world. And here's maybe a controversial statement, but I'm going to make it anyway. And that is, if your organization is currently talking about digital transformation, you should sell the shares short. Because the truth is, in May 2021, there is no more analog world unless you're an audiophile with your vinyl records. Everything in the world is now digitized in some shape or form. It's crazy that you can now have something called a non-fungible token that you can sell for millions of dollars. In this case, it was Jack Dorsey's first tweet. He digitally sold his first tweet for 44 million rands a few weeks back. A non-fungible token is a digital token that represents something that can't be replicated. It's an entirely new asset class, as crazy as that may seem, but just illustrates the degree to which the world has digitized. And then, folks, we've been writing in our business now for 14 years, every Thursday, an article of news from the future. Not predictions, because those are crazy, but scenarios of possible futures, with the challenge that the reader says, what if that were true? And a few years ago, we wrote this Mind Bullet, and we said, in the next few years, by 2025, no one will pay for insurance again. Of course, if you read the words in the article, it says that the model will fundamentally change because of the digitization in the world. It's not that insurance disappears, but the way it's done, the way it's shaped, the way it's formed fundamentally changes. And then, of course, I come from an investment background, which is where Isak and I knew each other way back when. And you now look at these sort of digital wealth advisors, if you like. This is one called Unify Money. And the rate of change that's happening in this world is absolutely profound. And of course, who doesn't understand this is the traditional financial services players like the big banks and so forth. And the world is changing enormously. Why? Because of what Peter Diamandis calls the 6 Ds. He says every single industry, whether you're a general practitioner or whether you're an architect or whether you're an auditor, everything is being digitized in some shape or form. For some of us, it's deceptive because we don't know or don't want to know about it. But ultimately, it starts disrupting life as we know it, and then it changes the financial model. It makes access to the utility much cheaper. That's the demonetized word. It shifts the value away from the tangible asset, and it makes the value all about the utility or the experience. That's the dematerialization word. And when all of those happen, millions more people get access to the utility or the experience or the service. And that's called democratization. So if you take the auditing profession, for example, my daughter's recently qualified, I funded it, might have been the worst investment I ever made, if she relies on the fact that she balances P&Ls and financial statements as a living. That will be automated. Think of it this way. Everything that can be automated in the next 5 to 10 years will be automated. However, if my daughter learns that what she did when she was studying to be a chartered accountant was to develop a way of critical thinking, of analysis, of developing an insight to understand a problem, then she will be immensely valuable. But it's happening in the auditing profession. It's happening as radiologists, which are pattern recognition experts. It's happening in healthcare, education, transport, financial services, banking, you name it. I can't think of a single industry that is not being digitized. I was watching a video this afternoon of companies now that can construct multi-story apartment blocks, 12 apartment blocks in 4 stories, can print them in 48 hours with a 3D industrial printer using concrete and cement to print. Incredible. Even the most industrialized industries are being affected. And here's the thing. Even those parts of our world that hate change, that are slow to change, like religion, for example, are also being digitized. The Roman Catholic Church at the moment has an app, and if you've done something bad, you open the app, you confess your sins, press the button, and the app will tell you what you have to do to get absolution for your sins. On my last business trip just before lockdown was to Beijing, as it happens, and amazingly, I never came back with COVID. But in Beijing, you can no longer use the excuse to a beggar to say, I'm sorry, I've got no cash with me anymore. because even the beggars now have barcodes and you can pay them with SnapScan. So everything we can think of in the world, folks, is being digitized in some shape or form. The truth is, we're on this curve. We have been on it since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And this is where we are right now. And what you notice is an incredibly steep curve coming at us in the next 10 to 20 years. Some futurists say in the next 20 years, more change than the last 100. Even if they're half right, it gets scary. The consequence of all of this is that we need to speed up our ability to understand the change and harness the change for our own benefit. This is one of the banks that I was working with in Beijing, and I asked them, how long does it take you to execute a new idea in your ecosystem of business partners? Now think about your business. How long does it take you in your business to execute a new idea into your partner network? Don't spell out the answer for me. Keep it quietly to yourself. Folks, because we bank take 36 hours. So speed even is becoming commoditized. Speed is even disappearing as a differentiator in the marketplace. Everything is going to happen faster and faster and faster. And of course, humans are going to have to adapt to that. And we do. So Airbnb, we all understand their business. Along comes COVID, closes their business, hugely successful, game over in the space of a few weeks. What does Brian Chesky, the CEO, do? Well, I guess the first night must have been a bit traumatic for him. But he then wakes up and he says, hang on a moment, I can't let this get on top of me, otherwise it will. So I have to change how I think. Again, what business is Airbnb in, actually, at its essence? And he said, we're not in the hotel business, we're not in the beds business, we're not in accommodation, we're in the experience business. So this is what they did. 14 days after COVID lockdown, Airbnb launched over 800 new online experiences where you can register, you can pay online, obviously, and you can get the best Spanish dancers to teach you how to do Spanish dancing in your own home. The best Russian violinists could come and show you how to play the Stradivarius in your home, etc., etc. But think about this, folks. 14 days is all it took for that entire global business to reimagine, rethink, curate, and execute 800 online experiences. Another one of my favorite examples is Jack Ma of Alibaba. He's the guy that's maybe gone missing, right? That the Chinese government are all over at the moment because of their regulatory frameworks. But Jack Ma had an epiphany one day, and he said, you know what? We live in a world of romance and Valentine's Day. And on Valentine's Day, people buy themselves gifts and their loved ones gifts. But what about all the lonely people? Even though we've got social media, people are lonely, and more people are lonely. So he said, I've got an idea. Why don't I tell all the lonely people to buy themselves a gift on a date that represents all the singles in the world? 1111, 11th of November. And he created, folks, something that had never existed in the world of retail. Now, this was not a retailer. He was a school teacher. He applied for 100 jobs and got turned down. And then he started Alibaba. Now, let's look at what happened during the year of COVID on the 11th of November last year. And here it is, $74 billion worth of sales over that period of 24 hours. It's an insane amount to think about. All triggered not by an AI, not by a robot, but by a human with an insight. Obviously, lots of execution using all the technologies available, etc., but the human had the idea. Understand the complexity of what he built when he delivered the first parcel 10 minutes after the order. This wasn't a simple business with a few retailers. He engaged and built relationships and systems with hundreds of thousands of businesses around the world. Massive operational supply chain complexity. And guess what? He didn't only sell cheap Chinese things. He sold thousands of very expensive motor cars, which, by the way, he also financed through his banking interests. But an incredible achievement for humankind, folks. Again, mindset, not technology. As the world embeds fourth industrial revolution capability into the system called business, it's now up to us humans to unleash our mindset, our ability to think and be curious and be creative and ensure the ongoing relevance of humans in the system called business, despite the arrival of very, very smart and getting smarter robots. But the truth is, we are living in an entirely connected world, a world where systems are connecting with one another. A world, folks, where sensors, small, tiny data transmitting sensors, very cheap, will be connecting every animate object, which is humans and animals and live beings, with every inanimate object in a system which itself understands itself, programs itself, spots arbitrage opportunities where there's a need and a gap and a value to be made. These systems will settle agreements, effect payment, etc. Human beings are becoming embedded in these systems, even us. Just watch this little story and get ready to be scared.
Will you call me? Sorry? Will you call me?
You mean telephone me?
Yes.
When?
Now.
But you're sitting right here.
This is why I wanted to have lunch. You just phone me? Now? Hello, Bethany speaking.
Hello?
You phoning for Bethany?
Yes. What are you doing?
This is Bethany. Can you hear me?
Well, you're right in front of me.
But can you hear me down the phone?
Oh, my gosh.
This is me. On the phone, I had it implanted. My hand is the phone. I can walk and talk because I'm on the phone inside my hand. I am the phone. This is what phones are going to be from now on. I have integrated. Thank you for your call.
Quite scary, right? But think of it, why do we carry these devices with a battery in them in our hands all the time? They're really clumsy, we drop them and the screens crack. Why don't we just embed the technology in our earlobe or maybe our mind? That's what Elon Musk is planning on doing, by the way. But the point is this, folks, that as this next era of Control, Alt, Delete, and Shift happens, every single aspect of life becomes truly smart in every single dimension. The world of business, supply chains, customers connecting with everyone else and your business and each other all become connected in real time and intelligent. But the real excitement happens when industries connect. When you get, for example, entertainment meeting banking. It's interesting that Capitec Bank has a rule, or used to have a rule, that 70% of the employees could not come from the banking world. They come from the hospitality industry. Why? Because they really understand customer service. And yes, the other 30 have to understand the intricacies of the world of money and banking and regulations and risk, etc. But when you get industries colliding, when entertainment collides with fast-moving consumer goods, when artificial intelligence collides with professional services, that's when the really exciting stuff happens. But of course, when that collision, that intersection happens, new industries emerge that very few people fully understand. And so the BMW boss, the global CEO of BMW, when he began to understand what Tesla had actually done to the motor car industry, he said, that's it, hands up, I'm out. It's time for me to go and discover something else to do. He simply didn't understand it, despite being one of the world's best car manufacturers. And so this leads me to another provocative statement, perhaps, and that, we tend to rely, when we're confused, when we don't know the answer, we look to see what others have been doing. We look and we try and judge who is doing the best in the world that I can learn from. Well, look at this image, and let me ask you, can you tell the different car makes from that image? These are 15, 16 of the world's best leading car manufacturers. Try and differentiate them for me. Not possible, right? I need to tell you who the different manufacturers are. So how do you think you differentiate? By following global best practice. You don't get bad cars anymore. Even Land Rovers don't leak oil anymore, right? They're fantastic. So how do you set yourself apart in a crowded, ultra-competitive marketplace? Don't follow what everyone else is doing. Reimagine it, even if it's crazy. Again, I call this not an SUV, but the angry triangle. But let's not forget, even if you or I might not have bought it, 250,000 crazy people bought it. The early adopters paid millions to Tesla to further the development of the angry triangle SUV. and it will grow, and it will evolve, and it will become much more acceptable in much larger market segments. And before you know it, no one buys any one of those other indistinguishable SUVs in the marketplace again. So we need to challenge ourselves to come up with what's going to be different and differentiated in the future, and not simply follow the herd. I mean, understand what happens, folks. This is a picture of the jaw of the megalodon shark, the greatest predator in the oceans ever. And inside its jaw is a great white, to give you a sense of scale. Despite that scale and efficiency, it's extinct today. The question is, which of businesses that we currently may want to invest in might become extinct? How many of us on this call would put all our money into General Electric, the company that Jack Welch was famous for running, right? How many of us would take all our pension money and put it into General Motors? And we wouldn't. And it's because we get a sense that these are yesterday's winners. They may become the next megalodon shark. And so each of us has to ask ourselves, how am I reinventing, reimagining myself and my business to stay relevant in the world that's changing so rapidly? Then, of course, assuming we've done that, the question is, what will the world expect of us from a success metric in the future? When we look at capital markets, companies, the stock markets are valuing companies that have an expectation of exponential growth in the future. And companies need to change customer expectations, change the marketplace entirely if they're going to succeed in doing that. Much like Amazon, Apple, Facebook, even Microsoft, etc., have done over the last while. How do you create the belief in the marketplace that you are going to grow exponentially into the future? In a world where normal capitalist success metrics like profit, market cap, PE ratio, turnover, scale, quantitative metrics are coming under more and more pressure because of the millions of people seemingly disregarded and not sharing equitably in the proceeds of capitalism. And so I believe in the next 10 years, there's going to be another reset moment, and that is how society measures our success as businesses. How do we build a business, folks, like the Taj Hotel in Mumbai that was attacked by terrorists? 13 people lost their lives on that attack. Not one guest was killed. The 13 were all employees who took the bullet to protect their guests. How did they do that? And when I spoke to the general manager of the hotel, he said, Anton, we've built a culture. People believe so strongly in what we're doing and in our view that guests are part of our family and you do anything to protect your family, that it wasn't a surprise that our employees did that. How do you get employees, ordinary people in the world, to go above and beyond to that extent? And a friend of mine wrote an amazing book called Firms of Endearment, and he found a whole range of companies that actually pay their staff better, pay suppliers better, spend 10% of their peer group on advertising, and still make more profit. So this is not motherhood and apple pie soft stuff. This is real bottom line financial consequences by doing business in a much better way. And when you look at the financial returns of Firms of Endearment versus Jim Collins' Good to Great Companies, most of which, by the way, no longer exist because his thesis was operational efficiency and cost management. Most of them don't exist anymore. But when you look at the financial performance of Firms of Endearment, I mean, just look at that. Over 20 years, conscious companies, almost 2,100%, versus ordinary Wall Street greedy companies, if I may say, only at 270%. A fundamental shift. So I think that leadership really needs to rethink the role of capitalism, of business, and of how we more equitably share the success if we're going to create an exciting future for everyone. And so what does that mean for leadership as I wrap up this conversation? Well, it means that we're going to have to understand very specifically which of the key assumptions in our business today that underpins our business today still stays relevant through a 2030 lens. Close your eyes. Imagine the world of 2030 that I've very fleetingly sketched this evening and say to yourself, in that world, how many of my assumptions remain valid? And the answer, folks, that you need to worry about is any that don't remain valid are therefore toxic by definition. They're toxic because they lead us to think we're doing okay, we're making a profit, we're surviving, but they're actually busy poisoning you from the inside and setting you up for failure, and you might not even be aware of it. And so we have to start taking different decisions as leaders if we're going to change the future role of business in society. If we're going to build companies that society wants to see succeed, if we're going to build companies that communities need to succeed, then we have to take different business decisions in the short term. And for every single decision you need to take in your business, my challenge to you is to ask yourself 5 new questions. Firstly, is this decision fit for the future, not just the present? Will this decision deliver potentially exponential value, not just linear returns or outcomes? Is this decision going to challenge the status quo for the better, or am I simply maintaining the way we've always done things around here? Am I disrupting something because it needs to be? Fourthly, will this decision lead to a more equitable outcome for more people in the ecosystem of business? And most importantly, at the end, will every single person that's impacted by this decision get goosebumps when they read about my decision? And the test is, if you can't answer positively to 3 out of those 5 decisions, then my challenge to you is, why do you take that decision? I suggest we should relook at the kind of decisions leaders are taking. And leaders, folks, also need to understand that we can't only find the experts about the future, because very few of them exist. What we really need to be filling our teams of people with are those of us that are just love exploring new and different problems, having different conversations, being curious, and then obviously being able to adapt to this new world that we're entering. It's a hugely exciting one. I'm very, very optimistic if one just looks over the noise of all the current ripples and just gets a sense of what tools we've got, what the big challenges are, and know that we come from a world where we didn't know whether tech would answer all the problems. But we live in a world where we know that tech can answer every problem facing the world. The question we need to ask ourselves is, do we want technology to do it? And how do we need to think to stay in charge of that process? Remember the wonderful words of Martin Luther King, who said in a very deep, gravelly voice, "I have a dream." What he didn't say, folks, is, I have a strategy, a budget, and a spreadsheet. So let's, in business, in our professions, in our own lives, let's just reimagine our own personal dreams and then set about creating it. Because the truth is, the future cannot become a matter of chance. We need to make choices and decisions today so that whatever that future is that arrives on our shores, it's a consequence of the choices we've made. And I believe it's going to be a very exciting future indeed.
Climate change,
deadly earthquake,
a suicide bomber,
terrorism,
nuclear device in the heart of the nation's capital.
It's no wonder that we're pessimistic. It's no wonder that people think that the world is getting worse. But perhaps that's not the case.
Perhaps we forget that we've only just begun.
Doing what's never been done before is intellectually seductive, whether or not we deem it practical.
What we're seeing is unfathomably new possibilities all of a sudden becoming available to us.
The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
You have to trust in something. Your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever.
We truly are living in an extraordinary time. And many people forget this.
So now technically your device is on. Can you tell? Can you hear me?
The yearning to do what we do in the service of something larger than ourselves.
Where did we come from? Are we alone in the universe? What is the future of the human race?
When you conduct those exercises, innovation follows just as day follows night.
We can do this. I know we can because we've done it before.
Stay hungry, stay foolish.
Folks, enjoy spending most of the rest of your life in the future, and remember, you'll never get out of it alive. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, wow.
Madam Chair.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Mr. Musgrave, for that insightful presentation. We may now continue with the meeting. I have now received the results of the voting from the scrutineers, KPMG, and the results are as follows. The resolution to receive and adopt the annual financial statements of the Trust for the year ended 31 December 2020, together with the included reports, was passed by 100%. The resolution to reappoint PricewaterhouseCoopers Incorporated as the auditors of the Trust was passed by 100%. The 3 candidates elected to become trustees are as follows, in alphabetical order. Mr. A.H. de Vries, Dr. N.H.P. Khosa, and Dr. C.M. Kruger. They will therefore be appointed as trustees, but it should be noted, in respect of any such persons who are not at present reflected as trustees in the current letters of authority of the Trust, that their appointment as trustees will only become effective when letters of authority are issued to them by the Master of the High Court, confirming their appointments as trustees in terms of the Trust Property Control Act. The resolution electing the members of the Trust Audit Committee was passed by 99.94%. The resolution approving the remuneration of the trustees was passed by 98.13%. As there is no further business before this meeting, I thank you for your attendance and declare this annual general meeting closed. Thank you.